Good morning.
Very belligerent behavior.
Welcome to the 132nd meeting of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. Bienvenue au 132e.
Welcome to meeting 132 of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs. Welcome, Mr. Minister.
And officials and others that are here today. A very friendly reminder to those who may not appear in front of committee often, just to respect the well-being and health of our interpreters. Please make sure if your earpiece is not in use that you've placed it on the sticker in front of you. Colleagues, we have two separate hours here, and they are distinct from one another. The first hour today will be on the minister's mandate, broadly speaking. The second hour will be more specific and relate to Bill C-65, which we have been undertaking a study of, as you know. Avec le ministre aujourd'hui, on a plusieurs... Today. So welcome to Daniel Rogers, who is the Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Services. From the Department of Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, Deputy Minister Tricia Geddes, welcome to you. And from the Privy Council Office, Mala Khanna, the Deputy Secretary to the Cabinet and Governance, and Alan Sutherland, welcome back, sir, to committee, the Assistant Secretary to the Cabinet, Machinery of Government and Democratic Institutions. Mr. LeBlanc, you'll have the floor for 5 minutes to provide opening remarks, at which point we will go into our regular line of questioning. Thank you for making yourself available, sir, and I'll turn the floor over now to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues, for the invitation. I was, as you kindly noted, Mr. Chair, a couple of minutes late. I had a discussion with some people in Montreal last evening around an issue that's important to all of us, gun control. And I came back from Montreal this morning, and there's some of our colleagues from that great city will know that the traffic sometimes is relentless. So I apologize, but I arrived directly from Montreal, Mr. Chair. Very happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me to talk about the mandate. Thank you for introducing my colleagues. Al Sutherland, I think, is a frequent flyer before this committee and does great work in democratic institutions, as does our Deputy Secretary, Mala Khanna, whom you introduced. And it is, I think, as the new Deputy Minister of Public Safety and the new Director of the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, both for Trish and Dan, their first chance certainly to be with me before a committee. They've been in these important functions in the jobs they have now, but for a week or 10 days. So, Trish and Dan, thank you for joining us. Monsieur le Président,
Mr. Chair, all in the world, democracies are being tried. In this context of turbulence, it remains true that Canadians have many reasons to be proud of our democracy and the integrity of our electoral system. Of course, democracy requires our attention every day, and not only during elections. We must also ensure that it stays sound and dynamic, because our institutions and our democratic traditions are the very foundation of our values, and it reflects who we are as Canadians. As elected officials, I believe that we have a responsibility together, a special responsibility to look over our institutions and our democratic traditions and, of course, keep them sound. We do not always agree on the approach we need to take, but our democratic institutions and values exist to help us overcome these differences and to maintain public interest in the forefront.
Mr. Chair, as you noted, I look forward to discussing through that frame what we can do together to keep our democracy strong. Over the last number of years, our government has put in place a range of measures to protect democratic institutions and, in particular, address the evolving and growing threat of foreign interference. In advance of the 2019 election, as colleagues know, we established the Plan to Protect Canada's Democracy, bringing together all the agencies and the departments that have a role in ensuring our elections are secure, fair, and transparent. To ensure our measures remain adaptable in the face of new and evolving threats, the plan was updated ahead of the 2021 federal election, and we're going through that very exercise again ahead of the next federal election. All this work is being coordinated by a group at Privy Council Office known as the Protecting Democracy Unit, which our government established in 2023 to ensure there was a central coordinating body for all things related to threats to our elections. We've also put in place the Security and Intelligence Threats to Elections Task Force. You've heard about these groups, I'm sure, in many of your proceedings, composed of experts from CSIS, the Communication Security Establishment, or CSE, the Department of Foreign Affairs, of course, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. This is the principal mechanism to monitor the threat from hostile state interference during elections and, of course, by-elections as well. The Site Task Force works closely with the members of the panel that governs the Critical Election Incident Public Protocol. In the event of a threat to the integrity of the general election, the protocol lays out how political parties and Canadians would be informed of that threat. The panel is chaired by Canada's most senior public servant, the Clerk of the Privy Council, and is composed of senior public servants who bring experience in national security, foreign affairs, and democratic governance. Ensemble, ces mesures ont considéré.
Together, these measures have strongly enhanced our capacity to face any threats over our democracy. But we must always ask what we can do better. And that is why in September 2023, as our colleagues very well know, the government announced the establishment of the Public Inquiry on Public Interference on electoral processes and democratic institutions at the federal level. The establishment of this commission, presided over by Justice Hogg, followed broad consultations with various parties recognized in the House of Commons. All political parties agreed on the mandate and the appointment of Judge Hogg as well. For its part, the government made the commitment to provide the Commission unprecedented access to classified information and cabinet confidence. You will recall the extraordinary discussion we had in June on that particular topic. As members of this committee very well know, the Commission presented a provisional report on the 3rd of May 2024, and the final report is expected on the 31st of December 2024. We look forward to considering the final report and the recommendations that commissioners will make to better protect our federal democratic processes against foreign interference.
To this broader discussion, as you noted during the second half of this appearance today, I'm looking forward to discussing Bill C-65, which proposes amendments to the Canada Elections Act to further remove, for example, barriers to voting, encouraging voter participation, protecting personal information, but of course, strengthening electoral safeguards as well against foreign interference. Encore une fois, Monsieur le Président, merci.
Once again, Mr. Chair, thank you. Thank you to your colleagues for this invitation. And you cannot imagine how much I'm looking forward to the next 2 hours. I can imagine, Mr. Minister. Thank you for coming once again.
The floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister, and to the officials. Minister, we learned at the public inquiry on foreign interference that your cabinet colleague Bill Blair, while he served in your current role as Minister of Public Safety, sat on a CSIS warrant for 54 days. National security officials testified at the inquiry that such a warrant is typically signed off by the minister in only a handful of days. And suspiciously, the target of the warrant was none other than a former Ontario Liberal cabinet minister and key organizer and fundraiser for Justin Trudeau in the GTA. So why did it take 54 days to sign the warrant?
Mr. Chair, through you, Mr. Cooper, that's an interesting question. I was asked a similar question at the public inquiry. I was not the Minister of Public Safety. I have not seen that warrant. I can't speak to the circumstances around that warrant at all. And in fact, I was told by CSIS, and the director is here, that I'm not even allowed to discuss the existence of a particular warrant, although that one, as you know, is already in the public domain. So I'm not in a position to address any of the circumstances around that particular warrant. I wasn't involved at all.
Minister, will you launch a departmental review into what happened as far as this 54-day delay?
I look forward to hearing Justice Ugg's conclusions with respect to this issue. I think the bureaucratic term is it was well ventilated at the public inquiry. The judge may have some...
Aren't you concerned that there was this 54-day delay in your department, slow walking for 54 days, a national security investigation? Doesn't that cause you concern?
I have a lot of confidence in the work done by CSIS and their national security partners. I regularly have briefings on warrants that I'm asked to sign.
CSIS went to the minister's chief of staff after no action was taken on day 13. After the minister's chief of staff was briefed, the minister continued to sit on that warrant for all the way to 54 days. Isn't the real reason that you're unwilling to undertake a departmental review is because you know that Bill Blair and his chief of staff put the partisan interests of the Liberal Party ahead of national security? Isn't that why you're so disinterested?
Absolutely not, Mr. Cooper. You can make up a series of suppositions and allegations here. You have...
Why not undertake a review?
Again, Mr. Cooper, these are amongst the most sensitive intelligence instruments that CSIS and the Public Safety Department have. I've never heard of an internal departmental review with respect to a specific warrant. The department provides me advice with respect to every warrant that I'm asked to sign. And again, I've taken note because I have no information myself.
It's really
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper asked a question.
Yeah.
Chair,
So,
point of order.
Maybe the member from Matlock would allow me to answer the question.
Minister, we got a couple things happening here. So here's what I've got. I've got some interrupting, and I'm going to ask Mr. Cooper to afford the minister the opportunity to finish. I've got the minister taking an opportunity to himself provide some remarks, and then I've got a point of order from Mr. Turnbull, which I presume is in relation to what I've just said. And if that's the case, perhaps, Mr. Turnbull, we can just continue unless you feel the need to speak to this more specifically. All right. I paused the clock. Minister, I'm going to turn the floor back over to you, and I'm not even going to start the clock again for just a few seconds to be fair here. Allow you to answer Mr. Cooper's question. There's 2 minutes and 40 seconds remaining once I start the clock. Minister, the floor is yours.
So, Mr. Chair, thank you. And as I said, I have no personal insight into that particular warrant. I've taken note of public comments where Mr. Blair indicated that he signed that very quickly when he himself became aware of that warrant. I think Director Vigneault, the former director of CSIS, also noted. Sorry, Mr. Chair, is there a problem on your left?
Minister, I'll handle the ongoings. I'm going to permit you about 5.
Mr. Chair, with greatest respect, it's my time.
First of all, Mr. Cooper, you don't have the floor. Second of all, I've paused the clock. Minister, in about 10 seconds, if you can wrap that up, please, and then I'm going to start the clock again, to be fair to Mr. Cooper, and allow him the opportunity to continue with his line of questioning. Go ahead, Minister.
Mr. Chair, thank you. I would just draw the committee's attention and Mr. Cooper's attention to public comments that I had noted from former Director Vigneault about his level of comfort in terms of the time that this has taken. But my only insight into that are public comments I've seen. But we look forward, of course, to Justice Huggs addressing this issue should she decide to do so.
Did Bill Blair, his chief of staff, or anyone in the minister's office tip off the former Ontario Liberal cabinet minister that he was a target of a CSIS warrant?
Again, I congratulate Mr. Cooper on your fishing expedition. I was Minister of Fisheries and Oceans myself. I understand that kind of activity. Again, Mr. Chair, have no insight into that. I would, of course, Mr. Cooper being...
I would note, Minister, that PMO officials were caught tipping off the member for Don Valley North, or at least he was tipped off, and the only persons briefed were officials within the PMO who had national security clearances. So it's happened before. So I put it to you again, how can you be certain that the former Liberal cabinet minister was not tipped off after a long 54-day delay when you haven't even bothered to undertake a review?
Again, there's no evidence, Mr. Cooper, of what you just alleged around PMO officials tipping off MPs.
Well, then just undertake a review. Why not clear the air and undertake a review? 54 days of delay to protect this Liberal kingpin.
Again, Mr. Cooper, those are your suppositions, and I get that you're doing this so you can have nice clips for social media. It doesn't mean that what you're saying is in fact accurate or real.
Well, it is accurate that there was an unprecedented 54-day delay involving a national security investigation that was slow-walked, that just happened to concern a former Liberal cabinet minister and key organizer and fundraiser for the Prime Minister. Just a coincidence?
What is a coincidence is that you keep making up things, for example, that somebody tipped off this particular individual.
I asked you, do you
Point of
have
order,
any information in
Chair.
that regard? Can you provide the assurance that that didn't
Mr.
happen?
Cooper, I've got a point of order. Ms. O'Connell.
Chair, out of respect of interpreters, it's incredibly difficult to have two people speaking at one time. The member opposite can ask his questions and then allow time for a response, or else we're not going to have interpretation and they'll lose their time altogether. So I think it would suit everyone to allow that respect here.
Colleagues, I would tend to agree with Ms. O'Connell here. We do have to be respectful of the fact that we've got interpreters trying to do work that serves us and the public interest. I have tried to be very fair in pausing the clock here in order to not allow points of order to take away. However, at some point, we're going to have to keep going. Otherwise, the minister is going to have to go back to Montreal and get himself a Schwartz sandwich for lunch. So, Cooper, the floor is yours for 20 seconds.
Minister, again, why not undertake a review?
Mr. Chair, the deputy informs me that there have never been reviews around the particular issue of a specific warrant. There's a well-known process by law in terms of how these warrants are handled. We think that Justice Hugg, who has ventilated this issue in public hearings and perhaps in camera hearings, I don't know, would be in the best position to offer views on this. But again, Mr. Chair, I think it's important to note Mr. Cooper made a series of assertions about people potentially tipping off somebody who was the...
Minister,
Okay, thank
you're
you. Thank you, Minister.
mischaracterizing what
Mr.
I said,
Mr.
Minister.
Cooper,
You're
you don't-
mischaracterizing
Mr.
what I
Cooper.
said. I asked you whether you could provide
Michael.
assurance that that didn't happen, and you have been unable to provide an answer in that regard.
Okay, Mr. Cooper, you will be respectful of the role that I have to play as the chair of this committee to keep order. I have on 3 occasions this morning paused the clock, which is not common practice, in order to allow you to continue a line of questioning when you yourself have interrupted the minister. Your time was up. I provided the minister with an opportunity to respond, which is why we fought tooth and nail to have him here in the first place. So the clock has run on your opening line of questioning, and I would ask that the next time I open up the microphone to ask you to be respectful of my role as chair, that you do that. Mr. Duguid, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you, Minister LeBlanc, and I want to thank you and all the officials present for all you do to keep us safe, to keep our country safe. Thanks for being with us today. Minister, it has been suggested by the Leader of the Opposition that obtaining a security clearance and getting briefed on possible foreign interference would muzzle him. I wonder if you would just share with us and those who are watching today why this is important for the Leader of the Opposition's party, for his MPs, particularly in light of the significant foreign interference that we are seeing going on in our country.
Mr. Duguid, thank you for the question. One of the things that I think our government has done, which preceding governments had not done, is specifically ask, in the context of an election, for example, for representatives of the recognized parties to be security cleared during the context of an election, so they are in a position to receive classified briefings from intelligence officials about potential threats during the context of a writ period. We believe that should be an ongoing process where intelligence officials in a nonpartisan way can share appropriate information with political parties so they can, in fact, be more resilient and better prepared to counter threats of foreign interference in their democratic institutions. And the same thing would apply to the leader of a political party. It's well known in the public domain that certain hostile state actors target parliamentarians, not only in our House, but in the other place as well. I am briefed regularly on these threats. I have a lot of confidence in the work the RCMP and CSIS do, but a political leader who wants to be able to say to Canadians that he or she is confident that his or her political party, candidates, caucus are in fact the best persons to represent that party in an election or in the House of Commons, and that he or she has taken all the steps necessary to insulate and protect them from the threat of foreign interference, would be well advised to get that clearance, precisely as, for example, the leader of the NDP has, the leader of the Bloc Québécois has got that clearance, leader of the Green Party. It allows CSIS officials, in their judgment, to talk to these political leaders so they can be best positioned to resist any particular threat.
Thanks for that. I sit behind you in the House of Commons, Minister, a few rows back, and I've got a pretty good view of the opposition in front of me. And anytime the issue of the security clearance for the Conservative leader comes up, I hear taunts about naming names in the NSICOP report. And I think you've been very, very clear on why you can't do that, and you've made some kind of humorous comments about the RCMP carting you away in handcuffs. I wonder if, again, you'd give a few reflections on that, because I know you don't want to be carted away in handcuffs.
Well, at least not for that, Mr. Chair. If I'm going to be arrested, it probably won't be for that. But yeah, so, Mr. Chair, as I said, it was a funny moment. Deputy Commissioner Mark Flynn, who handles federal policing at the RCMP, was in a meeting with me in the days following the release of the NSICOP report. I think Trish, who was then our Associate Deputy Minister, was there, a number of officials, and I was coming to question period, and I said to the group that was there with me, including the Deputy Commissioner, when we're asked about releasing, it's a silly sort of thing that the opposition can do, release the names. They know it's against the law, and I'm not going to use parliamentary privilege to violate national security legislation or put the lives of people who do this work at risk. And I said, so what do we say when we're asked about releasing the names? And the Deputy Commissioner very helpfully said to me, I'll tell you what you can say, and you can quote me. He said, you can say that if you were to release those names, I will personally start the criminal investigation into your behavior, and it may very well end up in you being charged. If you've spent any time with Mark Flynn, he's a pretty serious senior police officer. I took his intervention to be extremely helpful. And as you said, Terry, Mr. Duguid, I don't expect or plan to be arrested for violating national security legislation. And a good place to start would be resisting the silly taunting, as you say, to release a series of names. It's irresponsible, it's reckless, and it's also illegal. And Justice Hugg, interestingly enough, came to the same conclusion when she was asked about her report naming names as a follow-up to the NSICOP report. And again, I'd be governed by the judgment of a senior justice of the Quebec Court of Appeal as well.
30 seconds. Sure.
OK. Madame Michaud, bienvenue à Proc. 6 minutes à vous.
Ms. Michaud, welcome to PROC. You have 6 minutes. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Minister, for being here. We always appreciate having you here in committee. You started your opening remarks by saying that everywhere in the world, democracies are being tried. Since last Tuesday, I have the impression that lots of things are being tested in the United States, particularly the personal safety of people on the U.S. territory. Before his election, Donald Trump promised to sent out thousands of people, asylum seekers, and lots of people. So we imagine that many of them will want to come to Canada. They are going to Google to find out how to come to Canada, and those Google searches have increased drastically since Tuesday. So there's a third country agreement saying that Canada could expel people who show up at our borders if they've already sought asylum in the United States. But there's a clause that says that if you enter Canada secretly and you are not identified within the 14 days, you could submit your asylum request by filing an application on the IRCC website or with an official. So to be able to respect the law, people will try to avoid it. So people may get into Canada secretly and hide. And we are already seeing people, traffickers, getting ready to make a lot of money. They are ready to hide people. They are young women that may be hidden in apartments in Canada for 14 days. That's what those traffickers do with this. God alone knows what those traffickers will do with those women for 14 days, so that after the 14 days, they can legally seek asylum in Canada. I know that you were just appointed vice chair of the Committee on Canada-U.S. Relations. Congratulations on that role. I wonder what you are going to do to make sure that a significant number of migrants do not show up in Canada that illegal or irregular way, since our own capacities have reached a limit. What do you intend to do? Mr. Chair, through you, Ms. Michaud, thank you for your question and for your congratulations. You had 30 seconds from Terry Duguid. Allow me to congratulate you on what I learned on the website of Radio Canada. So I'm happy for you. You've raised a very important question. It was a challenge. Everybody is aware of the challenge concerning Roxham Road. It's something I discussed with my counterparts from Quebec on several occasions. The good news is that the agreement has been approved to close a major loophole. As you described, the terms of the agreement contain the 14-day exception. However, I don't think we should presume or imagine before it becomes a threat that hundreds and thousands of people are going to arrive here. Of course, as you say, discussions are underway. We need to reassure Canadians. When we are convinced, as I am, that we have a border services and the GRs and the RCMP are ready with their contingency plans, I have been personally briefed by enforcement and border services. I trust the work they are doing, and they are working on that. We will continue working with Mr. Biden's administration, which is still there. They'll be there till January, as you know. When the new administration will be in place, we will take the necessary measures to work with the new administration. I am reassured by the plan that the border services and the RCMP has shared with me, but we will also be on the lookout. We will be working hard. We will continue sharing information with our American partners who are enormously focusing on their Southwest challenges. I discussed with Secretary Mayorkas, and he told me that he's happy with the cooperation between the Canadian officials with their American counterparts on the north border. But I know that we need to be visible. We need to reassure both Americans and Canadians that we are ready. If you may allow, Mr. Minister, there were cuts over the past year when it comes to staff at the borders. In the Public Safety Committee, we have had unions from the border services saying that they need resources. There are long delays. Roxham Road was closed down, but there are still people who can come in other ways through the borders. Could you share us the details of these plans that were shared with you to reassure Canadians? There are refugee defense groups, lawyers that are defending lawyers who are receiving photographs of Americans or people on American territory who are ready to cross over to Canada. This is a reality that we have to deal with very fast. I know that it's being discussed. Well, it may not have started. The plan has to be sound or solid for us to watch the border. Premier Legault has said that he doesn't trust the federal government to protect the borders. He himself intends to provide resources. What do you have to say to the provinces? Mr. Minister, you have 20 seconds left. Interesting discussion. Mr. Legault always reminds us of federal jurisdictions, provincial jurisdictions. I'm surprised that he wants to send Quebec officers to the borders, which is an area of federal jurisdiction, totally. Something we are ready to do. We are taking our responsibilities seriously when it comes to our jurisdiction. As you know, Ms. Michaud, I am confident with our plans. The RCMP, just like our public safety partners, always share the plans with their counterparts in Quebec. The Sûreté du Québec has received those plans, so I am confident in our capacity to be ready for any contingency. Thank you very much.
Brock, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Thank you very much, and welcome to the Minister. Happy to be here. My first question, Minister, is, as I'm sure you're aware, in the Public Safety Committee recently, Ms. Lauren Chen appeared and was not answering the questions that were being posed to her around alleged collusion with Russia to deliberately spread disinformation as a social media influencer. I'm wondering if you could clarify what assurances that you can provide that disinformation originating from the U.S. is being intercepted and shut down.
So, through you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Barron, thank you for that question. That I hadn't followed the details of the committee testimony. I'd heard, I think it was journalists had asked me about that particular testimony, but I do know that the United States Attorney General called me when I was with some colleagues in Brampton looking at backscatter scanners, looking at containers at intermodal terminals for potentially having stolen vehicles in them. The U.S. Attorney General called me to thank Canada for the work that CSIS and the RCMP had done with their American counterparts on this really alarming case of disinformation and funds originating in Russia. As was reported publicly, I think in an indictment or in a news conference of the U.S. Attorney General, attempts to use Canadian corporate structures to funnel this money to promote disinformation and certain extremist views. But with your indulgence, Mr. Chair, perhaps the director of CSIS can answer specifically questions that Ms. Barron asked.
I think, Minister, with all due respect, if I could perhaps get a written briefing with some more information, that'd be helpful so I can continue on to my next question. But I do appreciate getting more information in a written form, if you could. My next question, Minister, and now I think it's important when we're talking about strengthening our elections that we understand where we came from in order to better prepare for how to move forward. And I was hoping that you can indulge me a little bit around what was often known as Harper's Unfair Elections Act, specifically C-23 that was from June 2014. Now we know that this legislation was a direct attack on Elections Canada, on the Chief Electoral Officer, and I'm wondering if you could speak to the implications of that and how we are trying to move forward from that legislation.
Thank you, Ms. Barron, for that question. I was a member of the House when the then Harper government, with the current leader of the opposition as minister responsible for democratic institutions, proudly introduced legislation rather bizarrely named, pretending to, in fact, make elections and voting, for example, more accessible, the Fair Elections Act. What, in fact, and this was shared by a number of academics and civil society members, there were a series of measures in there to make voting, for example, harder to access. They had ensured that a series of measures around pieces of ID. I mean, I have a largely rural riding in New Brunswick. People would show up to vote with the card they would get in the mail. Everybody at that particular polling station knew that that person was called Mr. So-and-so and where they lived in a rural community center. But they had ensured that there were specific requirements around photo IDs. New Brunswick, for example, you don't have a photo on your Medicare card, as you do in other provinces. So it was a series of things designed, in our view, to suppress the vote. And we were happy that Parliament, in fact, corrected many of those measures in the Unfair Elections Act. And the bill that we're going to talk about in the next half of this conversation, we think goes even further in strengthening our electoral system and making it accessible and resilient to foreign interference.
Thank you, Minister. I'm happy you brought up the former Minister of Democratic Institutions at that time in 2014 and the now leader of the Conservative Party. I was hoping that you could provide your thoughts on the implications of having a leader of a party who is wanting to become prime minister, who is refusing to get vital information around national safety with security clearance. I know you've spoke about it a little bit already, but can you drill down a little bit further as to the implications on Canada as a whole when we are looking at the potential of a prime minister who refuses to have the information that is necessary for Canadians to remain safe?
Ms. Barron, thank you for that question. It follows up on our colleague Terry Duguid's question. In my job as the public safety minister, I regularly have updates from CSIS or the RCMP around particular threat vectors, particular hostile actors that are seeking to undermine Canada's economic security, Canada's democratic security, or in some national security threats, obviously, around violent extremist behavior. And I would think that if you want to lead a political party, as your leader did, being able to get the appropriate security clearance so that where there's a need to know, CSIS officials can update a particular leader about potential threats to their caucus, to their candidates. This is information that one assumes that somebody who pretends to want to be prime minister would want to know. Why, I can't speak to why the current leader of the opposition refuses to get that clearance. Others have surmised a whole series of things. He must know why he doesn't feel comfortable getting that clearance. I can't speak for him.
Thanks very much, Ms. Barron. That's all the time we have. Monsieur Berthold, la parole à vous pour 5 minutes.
Mr. Berthold, you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much, Mr. Minister, for being here. A while ago, you said that the very existence of a mandate of your office, if you were to reveal that, that would be against the law. Am I correct? I was told that I did not have the right to discuss the existence of a warrant that I had received. It goes to the court. You think it's illegal. I am not an expert. I'm not a legal expert. I don't know what goes on in the security services, but Mr. Rogers could give you clarifications. Question: the role of the government and that of security services, is it not to protect democracy and MPs against any threat of foreign interference? It is a responsibility that we have accepted, the first government that came up with measures in that direction. You are right. Who authorized the CST to give a briefing to Michael Chong, according to 12.1 of the act that came up with CSIS? Here again, you've asked a very technical question. I'll give you an answer, but I'll ask the director of the security services to add something. I was answering your question, Mr. Berthold, but you want to refer it to Mr. Rogers. I was going to give you my answer and tell you, Mr. Minister, one moment, please. Ms. McConnell raised that issue already here. Mr. Minister, I'll give the floor back to Mr. Berthold, but if we get to a point where you have not had the opportunity to answer, I will give you the floor to complete your response. Inaudible. I was answering Mr. Berthold's question. I was just about to answer when he interrupted me. I'll give you a few seconds to complete your response. There are two types. In English, these are threat reduction measures. There are two ways that the security services could inform someone of an existing threat when their personal safety is concerned or for national security purposes. I do not approve decisions taken by our intelligence services to meet someone in a context that doesn't consider 4 specific criteria as being high risk. I do not know if Mr. Chung's case was assessed as a high-risk threat reduction measure. I did not approve that measure. I was asked in some cases to approve, but that was when the action meets the criteria of high risk. My question was 8 seconds. Let me just mention that, Mr. Chair. Mr. Berthold, I give the minister time to respond. I don't want to remove his time for you.
We have the time to have a good, solid discussion. So I'm not going to penalize us for that. Monsieur Berthold, parole à vous.
Merci. À votre connaissance, est-ce que le premier ministre...
Thank you. Could the Prime Minister be prosecuted if he divulges secret information? Could the Prime Minister be prosecuted if he reveals information that has been classified as secret of his own volition? Once again, that's a legal question that an attorney or a legal expert can answer. I'm not responsible for criminal prosecution services in Canada. Question. So you do not master laws concerning secrecy. You don't know whether or not information could be revealed. That's very important for a minister. The Prime Minister, Mr. Leblanc, said that Conservative MPs are included in a list of MPs who are threatened or could be the subject of foreign interference. In your opinion, did the Prime Minister break the law by saying that candidates or MPs of a certain party alone were included in that list, even though he doesn't want to give the names of members of other parties who could be on that list? Would not be a purely political use of classified information? No. That is your characterization for partisan purposes. You can do so if you want, Mr. Berthold. But from a legal perspective, Mr. Leblanc, if you are looking for a specific legal opinion, I request you hire a criminal lawyer that is specialized in such investigations and prosecutions. Unfortunately, that is not my case. The good news, Mr. Chair, is that the director of the intelligence services is here with us. The director of CSIS is here. So Mr. Berthold claims that he wants very technical answers to his questions. The good news is that Mr. Rogers is here. So, Mr. Chair, he could answer those questions. It's not technical. It's very important to know that the Minister of Public Safety is aware of the laws that govern security and classified information, but cannot answer the question. So let me end by mentioning something. There's a party leader who obtained authorization recently. Is the head of the Bloc Québécois on the 5th of November, Mr. Yves-François Blanchet, responding to a question in French. Now that you have the security clearance, have you read the NCCOP report? And if so, what are your impressions? The Bloc leader responded in English, and that was strange. The question was...
But do not rejoice yourself. It's not about what I will tell you, about what I will not tell you. You saw I will tell even less after than before. Donc, pour que les gens puissent le savoir, ce mardi matin...
This Tuesday morning, don't rejoice of what I will telling you, but what I'll not tell you. So I'll give you more information than before. So the leader is confirming that the fact that he obtained the security attestation prevents him from giving information to Canadians, information that the Prime Minister himself decides to reveal to Canadians. Don't you find that irrespectful and unjustifiable, Mr. Leblanc? I find that unfortunate that you are mocking Mr. Blanchet's response in English. That is unfortunate. Mr. Blanchet had the courage that your leader did not have, Mr. Bedold, to request that security clearance. He acted in a responsible way. I think that as a leader of a political party, Mr. Bedold, I'll give the minister a few more seconds and then we'll end with your time. Mr. Bedold, if you are disturbed by your leader's behavior, attacking the Bloc Québécois leader is not worthy. So I think you should focus on your own leader, who is the one responsible. I am confident in Mr. Blanchet's decision.
Maybe I'm going back to my teaching days here, but it seems to make sense to me that if we stop arguing over the amount of time that each person gets to respond, forcing me to respond to points of orders, etc., that we would be okay. So trust that if the minister has a longer response, I'm not seeing that as some attempt on his part to filibuster. I'm not taking that time away from an opposition member. I'm letting the clock run. The clerk can verify this. She's right here beside me. If you have a concern about the way the clock has been running, then for all colleagues, time yourselves. I've been saying that for the last 6 months. Okay, so please trust that I am allowing for a fair exchange of questions and answers. I am not allowing a response or the length of a question to take away from the quality. If you don't trust that, time it yourselves. Mr. Duguid, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
No.
Oh, sorry. Ms. O'Connell, I'm living in the past. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all for being here. Minister, just following up on what Mr. Berthold had said, he suggested that you, as public safety minister, because you don't prosecute and lay charges, that somehow you're unaware of the laws. Could you complete your thought on that? Because I found that quite disturbing, that the Conservative Party somehow thinks the Minister of Public Safety is also the prosecutor and judge, should be kind of foretelling for what Conservatives think the role of a public safety minister is.
So, Ms. O'Connell, thank you for that question. I, too, was surprised that that seems to be the approach that they offered up. But I'm not to correct a senior parliamentarian like you, Ms. O'Connell, but they also think I should be the investigator. So one would investigate the case, prosecute your own case, and come to a conclusion. And then if you say you're not willing to do that, to say, well, you're not an expert in Canada's security law, feels rather amateur as an approach. But Ms. O'Connell, I think that what's interesting, and our Deputy Minister and the Director just confirmed this, the very existence of a threat reduction measure. Again, Mr. Berthold confused Mr. Chong's interview with CSIS officials. These are undertaken in the judgment. The Director of CSIS can approve a threat reduction measure within his authorities. I have total confidence that they do this in an entirely appropriate way. And there's a very narrow, rare category of high-risk threat reduction measures for which I'm asked to provide approval. But we don't actually discuss those particular threat reduction measures or those meetings. Some people, this is my view, I'm not speaking obviously for the public servants, but I think it's somewhat irresponsible to receive that and then to go talk about it in the House of Commons. Because the reason one gets that confidential, highly sensitive, in many cases, threat reduction briefing is to reduce the threat as opposed to parade around in front of a television camera. So that's just I don't think that's entirely consistent with best practices in terms of national security.
Thank you, and thank you for explaining to those who are trying to mislead the public on your role in these matters. I do want to move a little bit to something that is critically important to me, and frankly, I think all parliamentarians, and that's MP safety or parliamentarian safety, which includes our staff and those working on the Hill. We've seen recently a number of incidents involving, protesters, and everyone has a right to protest, but when it crosses the line, I want to speak a little bit about your role, keeping in mind that we have different layers in the sense of Parliamentary Protective Services. We have Ottawa Police here in the precinct. And then when we're in our ridings, we have local police that would have a responsibility. So I want to specifically ask about your role. Even just yesterday, I saw one of our parliamentary colleagues being escorted across the street while people screamed at her, "The PPS can't save you. You better bring in the RCMP," which I found as a direct threat of intimidation. And I want to have a serious conversation about that. While Mr. Cooper goes to happy hour with some of these folks, I think it's crucially important that we and all parliamentarians take this matter seriously. So within your mandate, recognizing that there are several police jurisdictions, what are you doing and what is your department doing to help ensure that there's safety for our elections and safety for parliamentarians and our staff that are working in these spaces when there are threats like that that are frankly not being called out by the leader of the opposition and, as I've mentioned, in fact, are having drinks with them?
Minister, about 35 seconds.
Ms. O'Connell, you raise a very important issue. I know you've done a lot of work in this area, as have a number of colleagues. I am deeply concerned about the rise of threats and intimidation and hate speech directed at people who step forward to serve their constituents and their country. I walk around Parliament Hill. I walk back and forth to the hotel where I stayed, in my office in the Confederation Building. I see some of those same people with their megaphones. I sort of hope their batteries would die. It's going to get colder. The batteries don't last as long in the cold weather, yelling really offensive things, and they tend to focus much of this vile on women, on racialized people. I understand that this circumstance is a problem. The Sergeant at Arms is doing, in our view, a very important job in this area. The RCMP work with them. We gave, as a department, many millions of dollars to the Ottawa Police to take responsibility, and I see our colleague from Ottawa, Vanier, was involved in that effort too, around the security of Wellington Street. But perhaps in subsequent questions, I share your concern. We have done a lot to increase, as has Parliament itself, but I think we all need to be thinking about what more we can do. Heaven forfend that there's a violent or a very unfortunate incident. I worry about that every day.
Minister. Madame Michaud, c'est à vous pour 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Ms. Michaud, 2 minutes, 30 seconds. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Minister, let me come back to the possible affluence of migrants from the U.S. You seem to not share my concerns, but many analysts have been talking about it in the media already. I know you are a close friend of Mr. Trudeau, and in 2016, when Donald Trump was elected for the first time, Mr. Trudeau sent an invitation to the entire planet to Donald Trump, inviting him to Canada. He launched an invitation to people who felt persecuted. I think this time around, you may give him a friendly reminder to be discreet on social media, maybe to avoid inviting people to Canada. Instead, maybe he should send a message saying that our capacity is limited. I take note of what you're saying about civil society in Quebec, groups that over the past few months and years have done incredible work. It's something I saw with Jean-François Roberge just a few months ago. You are right, Quebec has done more than its part when it comes to receiving immigrants. The social services there have done extraordinary work. Other provinces have also received asylum seekers. You know the context of the past few years, just as I do. It's a challenge for Canada. We do not underestimate the problem. We have shared funds with the Quebec government for that. But Ms. Michaud, you are saying that I don't share your concern. I understand the risk. I understand the way Canadians express their concerns when it comes to this possibility. I suggest that we should be careful and avoid fueling unjustified fears. I know that our security forces and the RCMP have taken measures to counter any such eventuality. Information is being changed between the Interior Services, the Interior Minister of the U.S., I just want to know something. The 14-day exception in the Safe Third Country Agreement, do you intend to discuss that with the Americans so that that could be removed and help us prevent anyone who wants to come to Canada illegally? In your first question, you congratulated me for the appointment as my appointment as vice chair of the committee. We've not had a meeting yet. The Prime Minister called me yesterday when I was in Montreal to talk about it. I don't know what the agenda will be, but I trust the amendments we made with the Biden administration. It resolved the issue on Roxham Road largely. I do not want to make any presumptions. I do not share the concern that you have that the 14-day exception is a threat and that will encourage people to come. But whatever the case, we are ready to take up our responsibilities with our allies. But we shall wait and see what happens over the coming months without any speculation. I understand the technicality, but I don't think we are there yet. We don't have to be discussing a purely hypothetical issue. Thank you very much, Ms. Michaud.
That's 30 seconds.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. Minister, I'm wondering if you can share a little bit. We've seen the horrific impacts on Canadian soil of 6 who have been who have had violence inflicted on them, and we know that there's information that is shared between Canada and India, and that this information is being used to directly provide information that people need to be able to inflict this violence on Canadian soil. And so it's a big, big concern, obviously. And I'm wondering if you could please share a little bit about the status of what that looks like until we get to the bottom of it and make sure that Canadians are safe.
So, Ms. Barron, thank you for a very important question. I certainly share your concern and the concern of those in the Sikh community and the Hindu community. There's this disinformation the government of India is fueling that can create these divisions. It's dividing Canadians against each other. It's saying to communities that their safety is in question. I have a lot of confidence again in the local and regional police. The RCMP work with them, but I share your concern about this escalation and work as hard as I can to ensure that these people are safe and free from this intimidation and violence. But the director of CSIS just said that there's the idea that we're giving the Indian government, we're sharing information with them, which then boomerangs back to create or to fuel directly or indirectly this circumstance, I don't think is accurate. There are very careful provisions around information sharing in order to protect human rights. There's an act of Parliament that specifically prevents the sharing of information if there's a risk of mistreatment. And again, if the director of CSIS can talk about how that, I don't participate in that information sharing on a daily basis with allies or other countries, but he's in a position, I think, to reassure people that we would not share with the government of India information that would in any way be possibly used to create this unacceptable circumstance on Canadian soil that we've seen.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Barron. There's very little time. Do you want to allow the director the remaining time, or because there's not going to be much for a follow-up? Okay.
Yes.
Well, Director Rogers, is there anything you want to add real quick here?
I think the minister summarized it well. There is an act that we have to comply with called the Avoiding Complicity and Mistreatment by Foreign Entities Act. We have strict information sharing protocols within the service to assess information before it's shared with any human rights partner that takes into account, or any foreign partner that takes into account their human rights record. And so the minister is correct. We take great efforts not to share information that could result in mistreatment.
Okay. Thanks very much, Ms. Barron. Mr. Calkins, floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Minister, since 2015, total violent crime in Canada is up 49.84%. This is my numbers. This is Statistics Canada. Homicides are up, as of last year, 43%. Gang-related homicides are up 78% as of last year. Total sexual assaults up 74%. Total violent firearms offenses, which is use of, discharge, or pointing a gun, are up 116% since 2015. Extortion is up 357% since 2015. Auto theft is up 45%. Minister, I was there when you and your cabinet colleagues voted for Bill C-75, voted for Bill C-70 or C-21, and one of those, and C-5 as well. One of the offenses, which are one of the impacts of voting for the legislation that your government has tabled, was to reduce minimum penalties for a number of offenses. One of them was actually extortion with a firearm, the mandatory minimum penalty of 4 years. That was the initiative that your government had, that you voted for. And in your home province of New Brunswick, extortion is up 301%. Why do you continue to pursue an agenda that goes after law-abiding firearms owners instead of an agenda that actually targets criminals and reduces crime on our streets?
Well, Mr. Calkins, thank you for the question. It won't surprise you that I don't share your view that our agenda goes against law-abiding sports persons or firearms owners. We certainly share the concern that you, I think, articulated, that's shared by many Canadians around recent incidents involving violent crime. Some of these extortion circumstances that we've witnessed in recent months, if I stick to the news conference of the Commissioner of the RCMP on Thanksgiving Monday, some of this rise in extortion in the South Asian community, for example, the Mayor of Edmonton has talked to me about it. The Mayor of Brampton, perhaps you're familiar, Patrick Brown, who was also a colleague of ours here in the House of Commons, has talked to me about this. A lot of good work is being done by our law enforcement authorities. They rely on partnerships with provinces and territories and municipal police forces. This work is done collaboratively. I have a great deal of confidence in that work, but I don't minimize the concern of Canadians. In my conversations with the Ontario Solicitor General, we try and figure out ways that we can work better together to bring down those very statistics that you spoke about.
But Minister, it's simply not true. Your government has spent millions of dollars to take away and confiscate the firearms, the lawfully owned property of vetted firearms owners across this country. Tens of millions of dollars have been spent so far. Millions more will have to be spent in order to achieve your goal to take property away from people who are simply not the problem. And yet your government has continued to pass legislation to make it easier for people to get out on bail, to make it easier for people to get out on parole. Even in the recent bill, I will applaud the fact that the only thing your government has done to unite the country is that the premiers of every province have written a letter saying that they would like you to change the bail or reverse the bail provisions that your government made in C-75. If you continue to focus on the wrong people, Minister, which is what you're focusing on right now, and I know this because I am intimately involved in the community. I am a hunter. I am an outdoorsman. I have actually been a law enforcement officer in the conservation enforcement field. I deal with people with firearms all of the time. And they will tell me, and your Prime Minister has even said in interviews, that they're going to confiscate guns, some of the guns that are being used by hunters. There's nobody. Your leader is even being trolled by police associations when he celebrated the 2-year handgun freeze transfer. Toronto Police, Vancouver Police are basically saying that everything that your government is doing to reduce gun violence and the optics of going after law-abiding citizens is not working. When will you reverse course? When will you go to your leader and say, reverse course, leave law-abiding citizens alone, and let's focus on criminals, let's focus on the borders, and keep Canadians safe?
Minister, about 25 seconds.
Well, 25 seconds, because Mr. Calkin conflated a whole series of issues from removing military assault-style firearms.
The firearms that were in our lockers 4 or 5 years ago are still there.
Mr. Calkins.
They're still there. You haven't
Calkins.
banned anything, Minister.
Mr. Turnbull, on a point of order.
Well, it's the same thing here, running roughshod over the witnesses. If you wanted the minister to be here for 2 hours and he's come, it'd be nice if you gave him a chance to answer his question. Yeah, well, an answer would be helpful.
The real tragedy here was I was just about to hold both the minister and Mr. Calkins up as a fantastic example of how we can have an exchange without interruption. Colleagues, Mr. Calkins, you took a good chunk of time to ask the question. I'm going to give the minister a few seconds to respond. I'm going to ask colleagues that we try not to interrupt, and we'll be out of this round before we know it. Minister, just give you a few seconds.
Chair, so thank you for your indulgence. Mr. Calkins conflated bail reform. We also work with the provinces, and the House passed legislation, in fact, to provide reverse onuses on some violent repeat offenders in terms of their access to bail. He forgot that a piece of it. Our government made a commitment in 2021 to remove assault-style firearms from the streets of Canadians. Mr. Calkins says he's a hunter. He knows a lot of people who are hunters. I know a lot of people who are law-abiding gun owners as well, who are sports persons or go hunting. They don't normally go hunting with an assault-style military firearm. So we think that it's in the public safety. I'm sorry, I'm hearing some background noise here, Mr. Chair. Look, I've given a great answer, and I'm happy to leave it at that.
There is a bit of noise, Minister, but I was about to cut you off anyway. So thank you, Mr. Calkins. Okay, colleagues, we've made it through the for colleagues. Thank you. We've just about made it through. Madame Fortier will have the floor for 5 minutes, 5 minutes, and then we're going to be completed with our first round here. Madame Fortier, à vous pour 5 minutes.
Oui, merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Minister, for coming. Congratulations on your new role as Vice Chair for the committee responsible for U.S.-Canada relations. That's a very important committee. I had the privilege of sitting on many such committees, so that's one additional way to make sure that you may realize your mandate, and that's what we are currently discussing. I'm wondering whether you may share your role. You are responsible for one of the main agencies whose mission is to ensure public safety. Could you tell us how the cuts made by the last government in our public safety agencies affected public safety, of course, and how the investments we have made to restore conservative cuts will help us ensure the safety of Canadians? Ms. Fortier, thank you for your question. You are right. I had the privilege as Minister of Public Safety to see the very impressive work that is being done by the men and women who work with the RCMP, the Border Services, Canada Correctional Services, the various probation, safety, and intelligence services, and the public servants who also work with public safety, who try to coordinate the work done by all the major agencies. There's always financial pressure on those agencies who are doing their best with the budget they have. As a government, we felt it was good to enhance or increase the money for the border services, for CCs that had not enjoyed any increases. The context of their work has evolved. I personally see the important and essential work they are doing, but which is not necessarily visible to many Canadians, as should be the case. We felt it necessary to increase their budget. The former government, you referred to that, Ms. Fortier, the former government cut, I think, 800 border services agents during the last year of their mandate. Either they cut 1,000 with a plan to add 800 cuts, or the other. Did they cut 800 or 1,000 with a plan to add other reductions afterwards? But clearly there were cuts. I do not remember the figures exactly, but I was very surprised, particularly since our colleagues here incorrectly talked about reductions that we made at the border services, for example, when it's their government that find it necessary to reduce the budget, whereas it's their government that was responsible. I often joke with my colleagues, we can always do more with more money. My work is to convince the Minister of Finance, my colleagues, and my boss to invest as much as possible in the right place particularly they provide the right tools. But I totally trust the work that is being done. But I also accept that we can always work towards adding resources and staff, but we do so as the threats evolve in a context of foreign interference, in a context of concerns about border safety. We need to target the support we are providing. Particularly, we need to trust Canadians. We need to ensure that Canadians trust us. We are talking about foreign interference. We have seen that this situation is happening in other countries, particularly in our G7 allied countries. Could you explain how Canada is collaborating with other countries, including the United States? And maybe now with the new administration that is coming, and also the collaboration with the UK. Once again, Ms. Fortier, that is a very important question. Canada is seeing increased foreign interference threats, and this is something we've discussed publicly. It's something that many of our allies are witnessing as well. The Five Eyes.
We have a meeting with the different ministers. There's 10 eyes in the meeting. But ces réunions-là, Madame Fortier, sont souvent...
Those meetings usually focus on threats, on risks that are shared. There's transnational repression. We've seen that with China and India, for example. We are seeing this in the UK, in the United States. Unfortunately, this is a common problem. We often share intelligence that is very important to protect our citizens, and we are sharing best practices. I had some interesting discussions with the Minister of Australia and New Zealand. The context is different, but the threats are usually the same. So it's one way for us to share best practices to do the work that people expect us to do. Thank you, Mr. Minister. Thank you, Ms. Fortier.
To briefly suspend, because we don't have any witnesses appearing virtually, it should be a relatively quick turnover. So I'm going to suspend for about 2 minutes, and I'm going to start at that 2-minute mark. A couple of witnesses that won't be with us in the second panel. I'd like to thank the Deputy Minister Geddes, the Director of CSIS, Mr. Rogers, for being here. Thank you very much. Colleagues, suspended for about 2 minutes, and we'll come back into our second round.
Introduce my colleagues, two of whom were here for the previous hour, but our colleague Rachel Pereira, who is the director of the Electoral and Senatorial Policy Unit at Privy Council, has joined us. Mr. Chair, this is to discuss with your committee Bill C-65, the Electoral Participation Act. Comme les députés le savent, dans ma lettre de
As members of parliament know, in my mandate letter, I was made to examine the recommendations of the chief electoral officer to reinforce protection against foreign interference and disinformation, and to examine the interaction between technology and democracy in order to protect Canada's elections and democratic institutions. Bill C-65, which is before you, is the culmination of these three priorities. Mr. Chair, as its first priority, Bill C-65 proposes, amongst other measures, to add 2 advanced polling days, improve the special ballot voting process, and make the popular vote on campus program permanent. As an MP of Beauséjour, I'm very proud to be representing the University in New Brunswick. I see the students voting proudly during elections on campus. We want to make this program permanent.
Still remains the single most popular and traditional way for Canadians to vote. For that reason, our government in Bill C-65 proposed to move the October 2025 fixed election date by 1 week forward to avoid a conflict with Diwali and certain municipal elections in provinces like Alberta. That being said, Mr. Chair, I've certainly taken note of comments from colleagues, and I'm happy to reiterate the comments I made at the second reading debate, that the government will, of course, happily respect the will of this committee should there be a desire to amend the legislation and move the date forward even further or move it back to the October 20th date. I'm happy to see the work of this committee. I trust, Mr. Chair, that we can move forward on the many important amendments in this bill that we think that are proposed that we think improve safeguards for our elections. Take, for example, the proposed improvements for long-term care residents and those persons with disabilities, which seeks to give electors the ability to select an individual to assist them. This was recommended by the Chief Electoral Officer with the existing integrity measures in place. So I think of persons in my riding who may have limited reading skills, who may want a trusted person with them to help them ensure that, in fact, they're casting the vote for the person they intend to vote for. Mr. Chair, the second priority of Bill C-65 is the protection of personal information. This legislation proposes new privacy policy requirements as a condition of registration for federal political parties, with the Canada Elections Act continuing to be a national, uniform, and exclusive regime for federal political parties' dealings with personal information. And finally, and this is an important one, Mr. Chair, it sort of picks up on our previous discussion. Bill C-65 proposes a number of measures to continue to meet the evolving threats of foreign interference and disinformation. This would be done through measures that would, for example, extend the existing bans on foreign influence and misleading publications so that they apply at all times and not just during a particular election period, and add a new ban to protect against intentional disinformation about candidates and the facts of our electoral process. And by that I would mean polling locations, sort of the mechanics of the electoral process. Monsieur le Président, la protection des élections au Canada.
Mr. Chair, protecting Canada's elections should not be a partisan issue. This bill contains many important measures that Canadians want to see implemented before the next election. I hope that as parliamentarians, we can work together to improve the legislation as should be the case, and as your committee will do, probably, I hope, to ensure the passage of this legislation, which will guarantee that Canadian elections are accessible, transparent, and resilient to threats to our democracy. I see you nodding, Mr. Chair. It probably means that you would like me to stop the extraordinary remarks I've just shared with you. I will do so with delight to answer your questions. Thank you, Mr. Minister.
For 6 minutes.
Mr. Chair, and thank you to the Minister for being here. I want to get into the details for Canadians to know exactly how this bill came together in full cooperation with the NDP. I don't want to get too personal, Minister, but do you remember this year on Valentine's Day who you had dinner with?
I do. It was a very romantic moment. I live in New Brunswick. I was in Ottawa. I was away from, obviously, my family. And it was a February night, and we went to a great place called Colonnade Pizza. It's at the corner of Metcalfe and Gilmore. And I went, it's great pizza. I would invite you to go. And my date for that evening was a great guy. You maybe remember him. Daniel Blakey was his name.
Yes, well, thank you. So Daniel Blakey was the lead negotiator for the NDP on this bill. And as a matter of fact, he stood right behind you in March when you made the announcement, and you had said on multiple occasions that this bill was part of the coalition to secure the continued support of the NDP. You even said at the press conference that you gave in response, quote, "The Prime Minister and Mr. Singh agreed to these important measures." Question, whose idea? Was it a Liberal idea or an NDP idea to change the date of the election so that soon-to-be defeated, dozens of them, NDP and Liberal MPs, would be guaranteed their pension? Liberal idea or NDP idea?
Mr. Chair, you'll allow me to correct some of the falsehoods in the premise of that question. You referred to a coalition. I know your leader's office wants you to keep using that phrase. We don't have a coalition with the NDP. It's called a supply and confidence agreement. Mr. Blakey wasn't the lead negotiator. I'm surprised you're using union terms, Mr. Duncan. That's great to see the Conservative Party has embraced the labor movement. Mr. Blakey was a partner with me as we developed this legislation, something that our leaders agreed to transparently in a supply and confidence agreement that was posted on the internet. So I know that you look for secret sort of meetings. The Valentine's Day dinner was so secret, we posted it on Twitter, and our leader...
So, Minister, here's the thing, is that we just got information minutes before this meeting started of, in fact, secret meetings that did take place only after Conservatives asked. We found information here that on January 25th, that there was NDP headquarters representatives that got a meeting with the Prime Minister's office, staff from your office in Elections Canada to get information and briefings behind the scenes, only revealed afterwards. Do you think it's appropriate that the NDP, not just MPs, on two different occasions, NDP party headquarters staff got access to the Prime Minister's office and to Elections Canada to get briefings that were not offered to any other party? I don't think Canadians find that very funny, and it was secret until we asked for details.
Again, you're a very experienced sleuth here, Mr. Duncan. I would congratulate you for that investigative work. This is absolutely normal. So do I think it's appropriate? Absolutely. Do I think it's normal in a Westminster parliamentary system where there's a supply and confidence agreement? Of course it is. These were routine meetings of senior officials of the Privy Council office. Mr. Sutherland was in some of these meetings. I was in meetings with Mr. Sutherland and the Chief Electoral Officer himself, where Mr. Blakey was present, so we could understand the advice both of the Privy Council officials and Elections Canada as we work together to develop this legislation. So you find it shocking that parliamentarians work together in a collaborative way. We think it's something that Canadians would find very positive.
What Canadians would not find positive is that NDP party headquarters staff were invited and attended those meetings. That is completely inappropriate of what happened there, where one political party was given access to information and documents and crafted a bill. But I'll go back again. The whole point that now the NDP absolutely wants to ignore and forget about was the changing of the election date. Was it a Liberal idea or an NDP idea to move back the election by a week so it guarantees any defeated Liberal and NDP MPs their pension? Whose idea was it, the Liberals or the NDP?
So again, you're a very clever clip you just got for some post that you may do later. But I think it's important for people to understand that pension entitlement had nothing to do with that decision to move the date. I'm lucky enough, I was elected in 2000, so it certainly wasn't my idea to be concerned about pension entitlement for myself. We think that Diwali is an important moment for a very significant community in Canada. There are municipal elections in the province of Alberta on that date. We worked with Elections Canada on a number of different scenarios of different dates. But as I said, Mr. Duncan, in order to reassure you that the little premise of your question, which you fabricate, wasn't the case, we would welcome this committee's judgment in moving the date and would welcome that when you get to the clause by clause, feel free to work with colleagues if you're so outraged and you want to explain why Diwali or the municipal elections in Alberta aren't important. Go ahead. But anytime you move the date, you're going to bump into a problem somewhere.
And here's the thing, Minister, is that it's not about Diwali, because what happened was when you moved it back a week, it then coincided with a territorial election and overlaps into Quebec. What you could have done was move the election earlier if that was truly the reason, and it's not. It's about securing the pensions by giving the election happening a week later. People know that because even just last week we heard when we asked your own officials, why don't you call it earlier, including into the summer? And it was, quote, the sorts of considerations that were made, you wouldn't want to break with summer holidays through Labor Day. That was the reason your officials said it didn't get moved earlier. So, Minister, I'll ask you, you don't want to have an election that coincides through Labor Day. When was the last time that happened?
I haven't taken note of every election. I remember one.
Let me answer for you, Minister. It was the last election.
Either way,
the Prime Minister called it when it was opportunistic for him, and now suddenly he forget when the last election was called.
This is the second time now today that I have had members around this table not respond to my intervention. And you guys are going to flip out in 45 minutes from now or 40 minutes from now or 30 minutes from now when I try to end this meeting, because you say there wasn't enough time for the minister. Respect the authority of the chair to try to operate the meeting in an effective and an efficient manner. Minister, there's no time left for a response. There's no time left for a question. Mr. Turnbull, the floor is yours for 6 minutes.
Minister, good to see you. The Conservative leader has been the only federal party leader that has been unwilling to get his security clearance. I would say, describe it as he's doing a bit of a wiggle worm, trying to get out of it. First, we heard the Conservatives say he can't because he'd be muzzled, but we know that's not true because every party leader other than him has got the security clearance and has received the briefings. We also know that the next excuse that was given was that he already had the clearance from back when he was in the Harper cabinet. We know that's not true because I asked the former clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Wernick, when he was here many months ago, and he said, no, if there's a change in life circumstances or a change in job or every 5 years that those background checks have to be redone. Can we clarify that current Conservative leader does not have top secret level security clearance? Quickly.
That is my understanding, Mr. Turnbull, for the reasons you just enunciated.
Thank you. And the other thing that we've heard from the Conservatives recently is that the background check is too intrusive for them, which is kind of hilarious considering every other person that takes national security seriously would go through the same intrusive background check to be able to get those briefings. Now, the latest version of this is that the Conservatives say, oh, we need to use the threat reduction measure.
Mr. Turnbull, sorry, I've got a point of order. Thank you. Oui, Monsieur Berthold.
Pertinence, Monsieur le Président.
Relevance, Mr. Chair.
As a reminder, we are here on 65 specifically. Mr. Turnbull, if you can try to direct your question to how it is relevant to 65, I would appreciate that. I'll turn the floor back over to you. Thank you.
On the same point of order,
Yes, Ms. O'Connell.
Mr. Chair, I recognize it's on C65. However, this is directly related to foreign interference, which is part of the bill. I would also argue that Mr. Duncan brought up party officials of the NDP. Part of this bill is also talking about, sorry, did I interrupt you? I was able to contain my composure. I would suggest you do the same. But Mr. Chair, without being interrupted, Mr. Duncan brought up party officials, and Mr. Turnbull is discussing the Conservative Party, and I suspect the leadership race that has been called into question with foreign interference, so I think it's relevant.
Okay, thank you for your insight, Ms. O'Connell. Mr. Turnbull, I'll turn the floor back over to you.
So now we have the Conservatives saying that, oh, we should just use a threat reduction measure. But wouldn't that be subject to the same limitations in terms of the Security of Information Act? So in a way, it doesn't get around this idea that somehow the Conservative leader could get a briefing through a threat reduction measure, which would allow him maybe more narrow in scope briefing, but it would still be subject to the Security of Information Act, would it not?
Mr. Turnbull, you're absolutely right. The threat reduction measures, we talked about that earlier in the meeting, allow CSIS officials to brief somebody because of an imminent or an ongoing threat to national security. The information that they would share in a threat reduction measure, for example, with the leader of the opposition, whether or not he obtained a security clearance, would absolutely be subject to the Security of Information Act. What that means in more simple terms is a person who would receive information, highly sensitive information, as part of an authorized threat reduction measure, would legally be bound to keep that information secret. And as you know, Mr. Turnbull, those, in fact, it's a criminal statute, the Security of Information Act. Violation of it brings a criminal prosecution. But it's done very specifically to protect the ability of CSIS to protect human sources. It's to protect their investigative capacities.
Thank you. And my understanding is that the briefing that would be for a threat reduction measure would be only the need to know information that would be limited in scope to specific to a personal threat of perhaps a member in the Conservative caucus in this particular case. So it would be not the same, it wouldn't be equivalent to a broader intelligence briefing that one could receive if they had the top secret security clearance. Is that correct?
You're absolutely right. That briefing would, as I understood from the director of CSIS, reveal the minimum information necessary in their judgment. None of this is decided by a partisan person, but in the director of CSIS's judgment, the minimum information necessary for that particular leader to take measures to reduce the threat. That's why it's called a threat reduction measure. But it would not provide in that particular threat reduction measure interview a broader threat landscape briefing or a more broader briefing about certain threat vectors that one would get if one had the top secret security clearance. But again, Mr. Turnbull, what's important is that all of that information that would be shared, whatever the instrument legally that was used to share that information, binds the person receiving the information to the provisions of the criminal statute known as the Security of Information Act.
Okay, last question is, so we've had the Conservative MP that actually is on the NSI COP committee, which is the Committee of All Parliamentarians, come to this committee. He's presented a private member's bill. He said he wants all members of Parliament to be able to get a security clearance. And when he was here, he actually said he thought if he had his way that he would make it mandatory for all MPs to have a security clearance. I find that slightly ironic given the fact that the Conservative leader is the only leader in the House of Commons that has not been willing to get his security clearance. Minister LeBlanc, do you find that slightly ironic?
Well, of course I find it ironic, and we've happy to discuss Mr. Ruff's bill at another point, but it does lay bare, I think, the hypocrisy, Mr. Turnbull, of what that particular Conservative member's leader is doing. But thank you for raising that important point.
Good time left, Chair. Perfect. So I will ask one more question. In terms of the Conservatives have always talked down our government's efforts on combating foreign interference. And yet when I look at the facts and I read all the reports, which I have done for many months on this committee as we studied it, it seems as though what they're claiming is just patently false, that our government is actually a leader in stepping up and providing an ecosystem approach that really looks at how we can combat and prevent any interference in our democracy. Minister LeBlanc, can you please talk about how C-65 adds to the toolbox and gives us an even stronger ecosystem for preventing foreign interference?
I'm sorry, Mr. Turnbull, we don't have time for the response.
Preamble was enough.
We're well over. Yeah, exactly. Madame Gill, bienvenue encore. 6 minutes.
Ms. Gill, welcome back again. Thank you. Mr. Minister, we appreciate all those accompanying you today. I have questions. First of all, a question. Well, it's something you mentioned several times. The idea that C-65 seeks to improve access to voting and voter turnout. And for us, the Bloc Québécois, what concerns us is the overlap between the federal elections with the municipal elections in Quebec. On several occasions during your opening remarks and during your various interventions, you said you took into account the situation in Alberta, but for municipal elections in Quebec, I don't know what you said. The Union of Municipalities in Quebec contacted us at the committee, and they themselves said they had concerns about that. Maybe you could tell us what you think about that. I could quote you part of the letter saying that they are expressing concern about Section 5, where there's the overlap concerning the dates. This could have a negative impact. So I would like to know what you would respond to the UMQ. Thank you for the question, Ms. Gill. I'm very happy to see you in the committee today. I took note of the concerns expressed by the Union of Municipalities of Quebec. I worked at the Minister of Infrastructure at the time, and it's the Mayor of Gaspé who was the president of the union at the time. I know the good work they are doing and the importance of making sure that as much as possible, a federal election shouldn't overlap with a fixed date election, as is the case in many municipal elections. I understand that maybe in your province you are talking about advanced polling. I may be mistaken, but I imagine that the committee, your committee, will look into the question of the dates, but that is specifically the problem with a fixed date election. The fall is a very busy electoral period. We had 4 provincial elections this fall. Some political parties would like to bring down our election and get an early election. Well, sorry to interrupt you, Mr. Minister. You are not really answering my question. I understand that you've taken note of it, so you've taken note of their concerns, but at the same time, I wanted an answer. Maybe to give you the context, it's not only about the election date. There's a problem of premises, electoral staff. Sometimes you have the same people working in federal and provincial elections. So the difficulty may be more important. There's another issue of concern for us as well, for many reasons. But I will mention one. There's accessibility, the idea of increasing the voter turnout rate. I had the opportunity last week, or I think the beginning of this week, we talked about the issue of accessibility. Even the people celebrating Diwali will be able to vote. I don't want to put words in your mouth, in Mr. Sutherland's mouth, but mathematically speaking, everyone may vote with the current changes without us postponing the election date. So why maintain a date that no one here wants? Because everyone will be able to vote, whether it be Diwali or without Diwali. People will be able to celebrate and vote. So why maintain that date if, mathematically speaking, everyone can vote? Thank you. Very good question. Maybe in my comments I wasn't clear enough. We are maintaining the date well. We are conscious of the public comments made by many MPs, and we will be at ease changing the date if the committee feels that there's a need for the date to be changed. You are right. Technically, and this applies to municipal elections in Quebec, theoretically speaking, everyone could plan to vote by mail, in advance polling, but on the voting day, on the elections day, and this is something we saw this week in the United States 2 days ago, tens and thousands of people turned out to vote. On the election date, for reasons we understand, that election date is very interesting for millions of Canadians. I'm sorry I'll have to interrupt you once again. I understand what you're saying, but simply to clarify, because we all keep coming back to the voting day. As I said, well, you're saying that people may go vote, but once again, it takes resources. It's not simply a single voting date. It's more accessible, so we'll need more resources, more premises for a while. We don't even know what the impact, the overlap will have, the overlap of two elections. If people want, it's one thing for people to be able to vote anytime, but it's something else to organize two elections at the same time. There's the issue of human and material resources. That's something else. I understand that the committee will be looking into it. But I would like you to respond because you are the one who worked on the bill. So I imagine that these are the types of questions that may come up. We need to give the minister the opportunity to answer, but I need to complete my question. Mr. Minister, thank you, Chair. I totally share the concerns that you have expressed when it comes to premises. We've added 2 advanced polling days, and there will be community centers, municipal halls would likely be rented out for longer periods. So you are right, Ms. Gill, in that sense. But as I said, irrespective of the date we choose for a fixed date election, and yet again, I take note that you want elections right away. I took note of your leader's leader, that you're working hard to make sure that we don't get to a fixed date election in October next year. So you're working hard to make sure that's not the case. But irrespective of the date we choose on a fixed date election act, there's going to be tension. And you are right. It's not ideal, be it for religious reasons, municipal elections, provincial elections. We are doing the best we can. And the good news is that voters are very resilient. Thank you, Ms. Gill.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. Minister, as I'm sure you've seen here and in many other meetings, we know that the facts just don't seem to matter to our Conservative colleagues, which is really upsetting to see. They are very, very good at making clips, though, and I just want to acknowledge that often those clips are posted before we even leave the meeting, so I will give them credit for being exceptional clippers. At the risk of yes, and my colleagues are agreeing that they are very good at clipping, so that's good. Mr. Chair, my question to the minister today is around the election date. Now, at a risk of repeating myself over and over again, as soon as the implications to MP pensions was brought to my attention and my colleagues of the NDP attention, I was immediately up in the House of Commons proposing a solution to remove the clause that would make that come into effect. My colleagues, on the other hand, stood up to try to have the entire bill completely delayed, not put into place, because they don't want to see improvements to our elections process. They want to keep it exactly the way it is because it benefits them. And so my question to you, Minister, is I put forward an amendment on June 18th. My colleague MP Matheson put forward an amendment on June 18th to remove the clause that would put this unintended benefit, at least that's what I would assume it would be, unintended benefit to the MP's pensions, to remove that portion. Would you be in support of that amendment to see that portion removed?
Again, Mr. Chair, to Ms. Barron, thank you for the question. I won't be voting at this committee when you do your clause-by-clause work. You can speak to my Liberal colleagues and see how they will vote. I have said that as a representative of the government, if the committee decides to change that date, return the date 7 days earlier, that's entirely up to the committee. The pension consideration was not the consideration in the numerous so-called secret discussions that I would have had with your former colleague, Daniel Blakey, who stood with me when we announced this bill, including the date. I just draw your attention to that. But the controversy is such that if people want to change the date, that's fine. I do totally agree with you, Ms. Barron, that the Conservatives use that. Again, I was fisheries minister. There's an expression in English, red herring. They use that as an excuse to ensure that some of the things that we worked on, the NDP caucus and our government, to make voting more accessible. Do you think the Conservatives, Ms. Barron, want to have campus voting? Of course they don't. You think they want to ensure that mail-in ballots are more accessible? No. Everything they have done when Mr. Poilievre had my job at democratic institutions was to make voting more difficult. So you're right. They'll sort of contourner. They'll frame the argument around a date to distract from what I think, I don't know if you agree with me, is a desire to ensure that we don't either strengthen the elections regime to resist foreign interference as recommended by the Chief Electoral Officer of Canada, or deal with some of those accessibility issues that I think all parliamentarians should be interested in.
Thank you, Minister. I agree with a lot of what was said, and I believe that it is vitally important for us to be sitting around this table and talking about how to strengthen our elections. So I'm happy that we are discussing this bill today. There are some concerns that have been brought forward that I wanted to quickly ask when we had representatives from the CLC and the PSAC that were here. They were speaking to the concerns around they're nervous that the existing legislation is too broad and that it doesn't specify the right for unions to be able to communicate freely with their members. I'm wondering if you can clarify if you share that concern and if you see any concerns with us making any amendments to this bill to ensure that those rights are protected.
Ms. Barron, thank you for the question. Again, I certainly wouldn't purport to offer advice to a standing committee of the House that hasn't begun its clause by clause and what amendments in the judgment of the committee would be appropriate to pass. But I do share your concern. These particular elements of the bill, and maybe Mr. Sutherland has more technical experience than I would have in terms of the origin of this particular measure, it was specifically to ensure that the ability of unions or other third parties, we're focusing on unions, but other third parties that can participate in communications with their members in an election, have obligations under the Act to register. I think it's important that there be a transparency in terms of what unions would be doing, either in terms of third-party spending, advertising, but also in terms of communicating with their members. I think the concern was around not having a foreign actor use a particular union or other third-party participant in the election as a front to inappropriately or illegally interfere in the Canadian election. So there's a long history of unions, something we support, participating in the democratic process. So we would certainly share the concern that you have expressed and that union leaders would express around not inadvertently restricting what is a long-standing practice of unions being able to participate in the election. But it has to be done in a transparent way so that foreign money wouldn't flow to a union, or that a union, and it's not one of the big unions that you mentioned that might have been at this table, they're long-standing, reputable organizations that have existed for a long time. I think the concern may be around a smaller group that would suddenly, and we've seen it with respect to the earlier conversation around some Russian influence. One has to be careful to ensure that there's transparency and rigor, but in no way would we seek to limit what has been a historical right for them to participate in an electoral process, unions or other third parties.
Minister,
We think that's a good thing.
That's all the time. Thanks very much, Ms. Barron. Mr. Cooper, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Minister, you have stated with respect to the clause in the bill that pushes back the date of the next federal election, that the reason for that was to avoid a conflict with the holiday. You said that before, you said it at committee, but the date that was selected conflicts with the territorial election in Nunavut. And the chief electoral officer came before this committee and indicated that that would significantly strain electoral resources in Nunavut. So you talked about the holiday being important. I agree it is important. I agree the Alberta municipal elections are important. But do you not think the territorial election in Nunavut is also important? And why is it that of all the dates that were chosen, you chose that specific date?
So, Mr. Chair, Mr. Cooper, I think, identifies again something which I said is an ongoing challenge with a fixed election date. I hope Mr. Cooper in the House of Commons hasn't been using in any of his questions the silly phrase about time being up. Because, Mr. Cooper, you would, of course, want to have an election right now, so you shouldn't be worried about a fixed election date next October. But I'm glad you're turning your attention to that.
In solving this problem, you've created another problem in terms of a date that conflicts with a territorial election, which will have an adverse impact on the territory in terms of conducting two elections on the same date. But, you know, Minister, it does solve one problem, a problem not that Canadians have, but a problem that NDP Liberal politicians have, and that is that soon-to-be defeated NDP and Liberal MPs who would not qualify for their pension will suddenly collect their pension. They're going to pad their pockets. That's what the effect of it would be, is to pad the pockets of soon-to-be defeated NDP Liberal MPs. The fact that you profess ignorance of that fact is only because you've been caught, and the fact that you're willing to back down is, again, because you've been caught. Canadians have realized that that is exactly what you did or tried to do. So I'm going to put the question to you once again, a question you refused to answer when Mr. Duncan asked you. Whose idea was it to pad your pockets? Was it your idea, or was it the leader of the NDP's idea?
So congratulations, Mr. Cooper, on your clip. I hope you can get it up before the end of the meeting.
Just answer the question.
In the premise to your question, you had a series of, again, I find it very arrogant, Mr. Chair, that one would say soon to be defeated MPs. I wouldn't purport to decide how the voters in Edmonton, St. Albert will deal with Mr. Cooper in the next election. There's a certain arrogance, I think, from the Conservatives to say that, first of all, their members who would have, in their obsession with the pension focus, have benefited also. The idea that none of them might risk being defeated is the supreme arrogance I find.
Minister, answer the question. Whose idea was it? Was it your idea? Was it the leader of the NDP's idea? I asked you a very straightforward question. Answer the question.
So, Mr. Chair, we have explained when we introduced the bill that we had worked on this bill with the NDP caucus, as in the case it was Mr. Blakey, with respect to an agreement that Mr. Singh and the Prime Minister made. And we have noticed the manufactured indignation from the Conservatives around this issue. I agree with Ms. Barron to perhaps prevent them from dealing with what we think are substantive and positive
Well, when you
issues
had
in this.
when you had your behind closed doors secret meeting with the NDP, we see in response that Al Sutherland attended that meeting, but who in the PMO sat in on that meeting with officials in the NDP?
Again, Mr. Chair, it was such a secret meeting at a great pizza place on Metcalfe that we posted it on Twitter. But
Referring to the meeting on January 25th, where the chief electoral officer, among others, met with officials in the NDP. And the question we had asked was, who in the PMO, who in your office was at that meeting, if anyone?
There's 15 seconds left.
So again, Mr. Sutherland addressed that. He was at that meeting. By recollection, I think the meeting took place in my office in the Confederation Building. There was nobody from the Prime Minister's office in that meeting. I certainly don't have a recollection of that. I was working with a parliamentarian from another caucus who shared our objective in preparing this legislation, and we were lucky to benefit from the nonpartisan advice of both senior public servants and Elections Canada. There's no mystery. The Conservatives find it shocking that people would work together to try and improve our electoral system. I don't think Canadians find it shocking that parliamentarians would work together to strengthen our democracy as opposed to try and vandalize it like Mr. Cooper would do.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. Ms. Romanato, 5 minutes to you.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président. Thank you very much, Chair. Through you, I also like to thank the Minister for being here with us. I just want to mention something, Mr. Minister. The date for the Quebec municipal elections is Sunday, 2nd of November. My colleague, Ms. Gill, quoted a letter we received from the Union of Municipalities of Quebec. But let me quote something that was also mentioned in that same letter. It's saying, we propose to set the date on the 1st of December 2025, and this would significantly reduce the overlap period to 21 days, according to the date for triggering elections. So even the union asked that it be taken to the 1st of December, so later.
Mr. Minister, if you would like to.
No, si vous me permettez juste, parce que j'avais oublié.
If you may allow, I forgot that, Ms. Romanodo. Maybe the Conservatives will see a secret plot between the municipalities of Quebec and us to make sure that some MPs receive their pensions. I would not have imagined that they were part of the plot, but we risk seeing a message on social media in that direction. And you are totally right. This shows the challenge we have coming up with a fixed date election. The fall period is very busy. Ms. Ramanado, we are not triggering an election right away. There are some other political parties who want an election right away. Such disrespect for people in Nova Scotia who are now involved in their provincial elections.
Just wanted to say, as my colleague across the way, Madame Baron, said that the NDP will be bringing forward an amendment to this when we get to clause by clause. And I said in the last meeting that should that amendment be brought forward to keep the date on the 20th of October, I'd be prepared to support that. With that, though, part of this bill, it's 48 pages long, and we've been focusing a lot on the date. But there's so many more important things. You said it yourself. It's called the Elections Participation Act. And I want to talk a little bit about the measures that are in this bill that talk about increasing voter participation. And one of the parts that you talked about a little bit, but I would like to get more feedback from you, is on legislating campus vote. I know that we were not able to do that in the last election because of COVID, but I'd like to elaborate a little, if you could, on the importance of helping students who may be at universities outside of their home province, their home riding, the ability to participate in that. We've heard previously that when voters start voting at a young age, they're more likely to continue to vote. So could you elaborate a little bit on the importance of this measure?
Through you, Mr. Chair, Madame Romanado, thank you for, again, focusing on what we think should be a very positive, nonpartisan element of this bill. For the exact reasons you enunciated, encouraging young people on campuses to be able to vote. It's proven to be effective. It's easier for students to vote on campus. I think of Mount Allison University in my riding. It's an undergraduate, largely undergraduate campus. People, I think 30 or 40% of the students may come from New Brunswick. 60% would come from other provinces, a number of them from your province. When I visit the campus, there are students from across the country, obviously international students across the country. Their ability to be able to vote in an October election when they've been on campus, some of them maybe only for a month and a half, is very important. And we think that it shouldn't be at the discretion of a local returning officer. In the case of my riding in Beauséjour, Parliament should clearly express its view that Elections Canada and the returning officers in every constituency have an obligation to ensure that the polls can be accessible on university campuses. There are measures in the legislation around making it easier to get mail-in ballots. I spoke about some of the measures in terms of persons in long-term care homes. Many of these recommendations come, Madame Romanado, as you would know, from Elections Canada itself. Elections Canada does terrific work. It's world-leading and recognized globally as one of the most effective, secure, competent, non-partisan administrators of national elections in 4.5 time zones, in 10 provinces and 3 territories. They do terrific work, including with their provincial counterparts. So we should, as a committee and as a parliament, be very sensitive to the non-partisan suggestions and recommendations that in their judgment they would make. And we've tried to do that as much as possible to validate the great work that they do.
Thank you, Ms. Romanado. Madame Gill, 2 minutes 30 secondes.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Tout d'abord, j'aimerais...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to come back to the 2 questions that I asked earlier to state that the change of date means 2 things. It's not just a date. It means that you're deciding to give precedence to religion over democracy, and that can harm democracy. So that is why I wanted to come back to changing the date. And Mr. Chair, with all due respect, when the witnesses cannot answer in full, they can submit their answers in writing. And so I'd like to hear from the minister to see if he has any more to say on that in your deliberations. And finally, in a question on participation, I understand that you likely don't know all of these sections, but 231, 1 and 2, concerning votes where someone can be accompanied when they need assistance. And I think that you also talk about that in your preliminary remarks. I'd like to know, why was this change made to broaden the acceptance of someone to accompanying them? And secondly, concerning the swearing in, and that was removed. And for me, I'm wondering why previously the person had to swear in to not spoil the vote and to try to influence the vote, and now that's simply been removed from these sections. So for voters who need assistance and who want to ensure the legitimacy of the vote, I don't understand why that change is made. So I'd like to hear from you on that, please. If you'd allow me, it's a very technical question and a good one. Rachel is fully ready to explain. A lot of these changes, rather technical changes, were inspired by the work of Elections Canada and their recommendations, and Rachel can perhaps give more additional information on that. And once again, there's not much time left, so quickly, please, and you may submit something later if you wish. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Things that are being done in the bill for electors with disabilities or who need assistance marking their own ballot. The bill removes the restriction on who can help them. So those electors, so right now it's limited to family and friends, but those electors will be able to choose anyone, including a personal support worker or someone else to help them. The other measure in the bill is that that individual who assists an elector who needs assistance can help more than one person. That's the restriction that's being removed. The integrity measures are still in place. They cannot influence that vote. They cannot share the vote. It has to be secret. But that allows, for example, in a long-term care institution, a personal support worker, a healthcare worker to help more than one elector if they need assistance marking their ballot.
much, Madame Pereira. Merci, Madame Gill. Ms. Barron, 2.5 minutes to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Minister. Minister, I just want to first reiterate that, quite frankly, even though I wasn't directly the lead like my colleague Blakey, Daniel Blakey was, former MP Daniel Blakey, I'm incredibly proud of the work that has been done to increase participation, to improve our elections. This is vitally important work that we all need to be focused on, and instead the Conservatives want to focus on an aspect of this bill that, from the sounds of it, is going to be resolved in the clause by clause if all of my colleagues follow through with what they are saying today. And so I just want to reiterate that I'm happy that we were able to talk about some of the positives of this bill as well as the concerns, because there's still time for those concerns to be mitigated in the clause by clause. I did want to take the time, Minister, to ask you about an incident that I actually just recently found out about a former Conservative MP, his last name was Butt, MP Butt, from 2014, who claimed he saw voter cards being misused and deliberately misled the House and later retracted these comments. And I know we're talking about, in this bill, false statements being made, and I know you talked about how these are more around the mechanics or the mechanisms of the bill, but I'm wondering if you have any thoughts of any mechanisms that could be put into place to ensure Conservative members of Parliament or any members of Parliament cannot deliberately mislead the House and Canadians.
So, Ms. Barron, thank you for that question. And you're right. There is a lot in this bill, I think, that speaks to shared objectives that our leaders have about making the electoral system more accessible, ensuring continued confidence of Canadians in the electoral system. So I look forward to the committee's work in this regard. You raised, I don't remember that specific incident, although I was in the House 10 years ago, already 10 years ago in 2014. But I do remember the so-called Unfair Elections Act that the then Conservative government introduced. I think I mentioned it in answer to a previous question, deliberately tried to restrict the ability of persons to show up at a polling station with the card they receive in the mail saying this is the advanced polling date, this is the election date, you vote at this location. We've all received those cards. When we're canvassing an election, people go and get their card to ask questions about, this is a normal thing that happens. And we think that was a reasonable way for people to present themselves at the polling station and confirm their identity. The Conservatives sought to make it more difficult.
Can I just ask just a question before I run out of time? Were the Liberals consulted on this Elections Act that was being put forward? Were there any other parties aside from the Conservatives consulted when this act was being put forward? Do you recall this from 2014?
Again, I can't speak to other parties. You have some long-serving colleagues that could answer with respect to consultations with your party or your caucus, Ms. Barron, but certainly Mr. Harper's government would have had absolutely no interest in hearing from opposition MPs in terms of strengthening the Elections Act. Mr. Harper's government was focused on making voting more difficult, more restrictive, suppressing the vote. They certainly didn't ask. We were then the third party in opposition in 2014. They certainly didn't consult us when they sought to bring in a series of those sort of restrictive amendments.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Barron. Okay, colleagues, that's the end of today. Minister, thank you for making yourself available. Officials, same to you. Meeting adjourned, colleagues.